In my healing process, probably when I realized I was really depressed that year before, God began to work on my heart and work on the characteristics and traits of what I should look like in that next season. I will say that with things that are sent from God, all things will feel new. So when he came, he challenged, my husband challenged me to be a better woman. He had to make me realize I'm not like them. And I remember asking him, why are you single? No kids, great career, very handsome, very mindful,
very demure,
very strong, very man of God. And I'm like, why are you single? He was like, I'm a king and I know my worth. Floored. You hear me? Like, I was looking at my phone like,
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Minor Detail Podcast. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I am so grateful that you are watching today, that you are tuning in, listening, wherever you are, okay? I'm just grateful that you are here. I'm grateful that I get to have another conversation. Like, I don't take this for granted simply because, number one, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but also it's just not lost on me that that we're in spaces where we need encouragement. Like, we need to hear from other people who are very much walking through life, very much having their own human experiences that you all can sort of glean from and really take advantage of the wisdom, the life experience, the testimony, whatever it is, that you can take advantage and leave knowing that the same desires that God has placed in you, the same desires in your heart, the same things that you naturally desire, that you can do them too. Like, you can get up and really turn your potential into something much, much greater than you could ever imagine. So I'm excited that you are here. Before we jump in, I just want to remind you, for those who are tuning in on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. We want to keep you around. We want to do this for the long haul. Okay. I don't want you to miss any new episodes that are dropping. Y'all know we drop bi-weekly. If you are listening, please follow the podcast because there's more where this has come from. Okay. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest for the day. I'm so excited, y'all. We are jumping into what it means when you give God your yes. Okay. We know in the day and age of like social media, the highlight reel, seeing, the positive side of things. We know what it feels like on the opposite end when you're like, how did they get there? Or maybe even feeling some feelings like, I want to do that too. Sort of how like, I just introed us in, and I'm excited to dive in with our guest today, Aunna Trimble. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. She is a literal powerhouse. Okay. She is, number one, a woman who prays. It's something about a woman who prays, a real woman of God, okay? But she's really doing the work to sow and pour into other women and help strengthen them in their own gifts and bring them to a space where they too can walk in the authority that God has so graciously given them. So I'm excited to dive in. I'm excited to talk specifically about what your experience with surrender has been like, your experience with giving God your yes has been like, and just see where that takes us.
Yes, ma'am. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yay, of course. So before we like truly get into the conversation, let's talk about your background a little bit. Take us back to the beginning. Who is Aunna?
So I am Aunna Trimble. I am the proud wife of Jacoby Trimble.
Yes.
I am the owner and operator of Aunna Made It. It's a catering company, and I'm the founder and visionary of Girl You Gotta Pray Ministries. We are a nonprofit organization in Dallas, Texas that emphasizes on prayer and gathering the daughters. It's a community, it's a sisterhood, and ultimately I feel like it's the purpose that God has given me.
Yes, I love that so much. So you're from Dallas, right?
Kind of. Okay. I was born in Alabama.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time like in San Antonio and some rural areas. I grew up with my dad. And then in high school, I came to Dallas, DeSoto more specifically, and lived with my mom. And I've been here ever since about 2006.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you kind of got here like high school time frame. Same. I moved from Chicago when I was a junior in high school. We moved to Frisco. So if you're familiar with Dallas, for those of y'all listening in, suburbs, two different parts of the spectrum. We got the South and the North.
Correct.
How was that experience when you moved? Like, was it a big culture shift for you, or?
Honestly, no, because I would spend like summers with my mom. So I would go to church here. I had friends here. So when I came, it was just kind of like, oh, now I see some more people that I know from church. Like, I think it was more so a culture shock for people that would see me because everybody at DeSoto did not look like myself. So they're like, who is this girl? And then it's like, surprise, I'm actually mixed. Like, I'm like a lot of y'all. And so it was just a lot of I guess, explaining my identity in high school, because people would just look at the surface level and be like, who is she?
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're biracial, and so that whole transitioning into predominantly Black
Because it was predominantly Hispanic in San Antonio, Hispanic and white,
yeah.
and then transitioning to a predominantly Black school in high school.
How has that shaped your identity, or at least back then? What was that experience like?
I don't think I really had language to develop identity then. Like I said, I did a lot of explaining. I did a lot of almost feeling like you have to, when you in certain areas, and you've probably felt this too, like you're either not Black enough or you're too Black for the white side. You're not Black enough for the Black side. So it's just kind of like, I felt like that may have been the beginning of identity issues, because you're constantly battling sides of, who am I? But then it wasn't until my adult life when I really realized, like, my identity is daughter. It does not matter, my ethnicity, my background, things like that. But once I realized my identity in Christ, it trickled back then. It made so much more sense why, identity issues arose in that time.
Yeah, that's good. My identity is daughter. We're going to get to that.
Yes.
I love that. I love that so much. So we can fast forward a little bit, because I know when we had a talk initially, we were sort of uncovering, how you got to that point of surrender, if you will. So before we dive into that, I want to talk more about what that experience was like prior to, like, coming into adulthood, sort of making decisions for your own self. We all live, well, not all, but some of us have that experience of kind of being young, wild, free, doing the thing. What was that like?
Girl, I was rebellious. The spirit of rebellion was on me. I've always been raised in church. My grandfather was a preacher. My granddaddy, Nick, he was a preacher. I was raised in church. Every time, I would come with my mom. I'm in VBS. So I've always known the Lord. I just did not always govern myself accordingly.
Got you.
My actions in my early 20s did not say this is a daughter of Christ. So it was a lot of my way and not a lot of his way, which is what led up to my needing to surrender, because my ways did not get me far.
Yeah. No, that's real. And what's interesting, because I was going to ask you, like, when you were talking about sort of moving and upbringing, all of those things, it made me wonder, like, do you feel like your upbringing sort of influenced maybe what your adulthood sort of turned into, or was that more so like your own choices of rebellion? Because you kind of growing up in the church, you obviously, who God is, you are in the Word, you're very aware. Was it just sort of like you choosing that, I want to try this lifestyle instead? Like,
and I wouldn't even say that, because I wasn't just out here full of hell.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
I still knew who God was, and I've always had a reverence for him. My reverence, it was not always a healthy level. So I wasn't just out here just totally wilding out. But I grew up both my parents remarried when I was very young. So I grew up in a very loving household. My husband and I talk about that often. He was raised on survival. I was raised on love. So there's a lot of mending that we have to do in the middle, because someone that was raised on love and someone that was raised on survival have different outlooks on life.
For sure.
So I do not believe that my upbringing necessarily caused me to rebel. I think I was just being a normal 21-year-old, doing what we want to do.
No, that, and I love that you said that, because I think there is obviously like a true difference in those two scenarios. And I think sometimes too, I don't want to say like, the word is not overestimate, but sometimes we dramatize, or dramatize, I think is the word. We dramatize what that experience is like, because when we are young, maybe you're in your college years, or, you're in that, like you're saying, that 21 sort of age, and, it just kind of feels like the culture. Like it feels like the thing to do. I know for me, that was my experience, at least. It's like, going to college, having fun, partying, like it wasn't a huge deal. And I think to a certain extent, in today's day and age, I think we have to navigate that for ourselves to understand, like, maybe that's not the direction I want to go. Maybe I want to put this thing down. But what I heard you say that was most interesting is like understanding your level of reverence and understanding, understanding that it was different at one point in your life than it might be now. Were you able to identify with that? Was that something you wrestled with? Was there any conviction there? Because I think that that's very interesting. Like in the beginning, we just, we living our lives, do what we want, and then we get that knock, and it's like, oh, I never felt like this before. Like, I never felt, convicted after maybe having one too many drinks prior, or I never felt like maybe I shouldn't go to this place. You know what I mean? So for those who might be listening in and are sort of having a similar experience, maybe they're in those beginning stages, and are sort of like trying to pick up the phone and answer the call. What would you say that was like for you, that journey sort of?
So that's hard to answer. So I would say, of course, you hear the knock. And like you said, you begin to decide, like, okay, is this what I'm going to do? And it kind of goes into like fight or flight. Like, am I going to fight this? Am I going to just kind of let this pass by? But for me, I believe I endured a lot of unnecessary warfare because I ignored that call. We all have the ability to discern the voice of the Lord. And when we begin, like you said, to feel those convictions, we know right from wrong. Like, if you blacked out drunk, you're wrong. If you're sleeping with a different man every night, you're wrong. If you're in same-sex marriages, you're wrong. Like, there's many things that we know are deemed as wrong in the sight of God. And then that's where the spirit of rebellion comes. And it's like, okay, I'm going to just repent. But you're not truly repentant until you turn away. So we're really using that word in error because you're not repentant. You're sorry. You may be, you may want to apologize, but you're not truly repentant if you're not willing to turn. So for me, it was just a lot of times, God, if you get me out of this, I won't do it again.
Yeah.
Next week, doing it again. And it's like, it would get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until my life was like in shambles. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm ready. So I always tell people, like, I will forever use my testimony so that people do not have to endure what I endured, because we have free will. So if you know that you're doing something that is not according to the will of the Lord, that's not what he called you to do, you have the ability to go ahead and walk according to his purpose. And I always tell people, we can use our testimony so that someone can look at me and be like, you know what, I can surrender now. I really don't even have to continue to run from this call. I don't have to continue to deny the call. I can surrender now.
Do you think sometimes we overcomplicate what is versus what isn't in the will of God? Because I think sometimes that statement can be confusing, like walking in his perfect will, or walking according to God's plan. And I think for me, what I had to really learn is, like, if it's written in the word, that's sort of like baseline foundation, or, if you will, our do's and don'ts, you know. But I think where it gets a little convoluted is as I don't want to say as we step into the gray, but as you sort of grow. Honestly, growing in the faith can sometimes feel a little gray because you're like, okay, I know I'm doing X, Y, Z based according to the word, but now, this area, I feel like I do need to be in prayer for a little bit more guidance because it isn't as clear.
Right.
So we know the baseline, we know the foundation, and then to your point, it's kind of like continuing that walk, continuing that journey. So you talked about testimony, and why you always share your testimony. Would love to hear more about that because I think that's the perfect segue into, like, what brought you to your yes,
Okay. So again, in my 20s, I lived a very rebellious, I will say this, I don't regret any of it because it has shaped and molded me into who I am today. I went through a lot of terrible, tumultuous, draining relationships. I went through a lot of bad friendships. I went through a lot of undue warfare. But it wasn't until 2019 that God really, really, really got my attention. My grandmother got sick probably... My birthday's October 21st. I think I got a call like October 23rd. I was sitting at Ojeda's, my favorite restaurant. And my dad was like, oh, we have to take grandma to the hospital. They think she has like a UTI or something. And I was just like, okay, that's not bad. And then like it just went downhill very quickly.
Wow.
That next, I think that was might have been like a Friday. Like that weekend, I ended up going down there. And basically it was like, she doesn't have a lot of time to live. And so
From a UTI?
Well, that was what it stemmed to, but it wasn't that. Like, she had already had colon cancer prior before. She beat that.
Okay.
And then it was just like internal issues from cutting that colon cancer out, things like that. So it was that was just the underlying symptom of a bigger issue.
What kind of led to the bigger issue?
Right.
Got you.
And so I dropped everything. I was like, because in my 20s, because I did live that life where I did not spend a lot of time with my family like I should have, because I was very selfish in my 20s. So immediately I felt like I had to make up for lost times because I'm like, okay, there's not a lot of time left. Like I need to go make up for lost time. So go to San Antonio. I tell my job like, hey, I gotta go. And I had been at Capital One for years.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
and I just was like, I need to take a leave. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know if I was gonna get paid. Like I canceled all my catering clients for the holidays, and I was just like, I gotta go. So I went there. I took care of her. They ended up putting her on hospice. She was in the hospital. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to do anything. And I'll never forget. She looked at my dad and she was like, I want to go home and die. Like, I don't want to die in a hospital. And so I'm like, okay. All right, Lord, like, what are you doing? So, we pray that prayer. Lord, please, like, if you save my grandma, I'll never do nothing bad again. I'll be the best daughter you have ever seen. I will be an example disciple. Like, I will do whatever you say. So praying those prayers, I stay with her through like the end of October through November. And then it was November 23rd. It was 1:21 in the morning. And the TV had just shut off. And right before that, I was like, I don't think she's breathing. Because I slept in the bed with her every night up until she passed. Because I would have to check on her throughout the night and stuff. So I leaned over. We would check her, like, the oxygen, check her pulse. It kept saying error. So when the TV shut off, I felt like that was God saying, like, this is this ending. Because the remote was on the nightstand. There was no timer set. It was just the TV shut off. I felt like that was just symbolic of an end. So it was 1:21 in the morning, and I just got on my knees. I prayed. I, thank God, even despite her transitioning, because I had to go wake my dad up.
Yeah.
And that was...
Oh, that's tough. Yeah.
Girl.
Yeah.
So lost my grandma. During that time, I was in a prior relationship prior to my marriage, and he was nowhere to be found. I didn't have that support.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty much all that I needed from God to show me, number one, that this is not what I have for you right now, and I really need you to do what I'm calling you to do. And so she passed away, and ever since that day, God has had my surrendered yes.
Wow.
And there's a lot of shifting after that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you want to...
Yeah. No. We turn the corner. We are making the right and exiting, okay? Because I think that, what I believe I have seen a trend in our walk or in this walk is the suffering that brings you close to the feet. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like the suffering that brings you closer to the cross. And I think what's so interesting is that we do have a choice to make in that moment. Right. Like we do have free will in that moment. We can either lean into it or continue on in our own, whatever it be, like self-discovery, trying other things. You know what I mean? Like, or just completely ignoring even like our own emotions and feelings sometimes. And I think it always inspires me and it makes me feel empowered when I hear people's stories to know that they leaned into that thing. Yeah. Because this year I went through my own season of suffering, and I remember feeling like I don't have any other choice but to lean on the Lord. Like it never even felt like I had a choice, but I think about how different life could look right now, just maybe 6 months later, had I not made that decision. Right. And I don't mean that in like a dramatic way. I literally mean like, no, this is a lifeline type of deal, And so when you do give that yes, now comes the season of healing. Like now comes the time where you're officially kind of letting go of the old and inviting the new one. I will never forget too. I remember a couple of days after I was sort of experiencing what I was experiencing, I remember I had opened up, I don't know if I opened up my Bible or had something on YouTube, I don't remember, but it was the scripture where that says like, I'm doing a new thing, like, can you perceive it? You know, like, don't look back at the old. And I remember just reading through that, and I'm just like, Lord, you really be speaking to us. You know what I mean? But in your journey and in your transition of looking forward, God doing a new thing in your life, what did that require you? Because we know that it comes with cutting.
It does.
The cost.
So I should have prefaced my grandmother's transition. Prior to that, I was in the deepest depression of my life. Wow. Like that summer, I was on like medicine for anxiety, for sleeping. Like I remember asking my therapist, like, could you up my trazodone dose? And she was like, you have enough to tranquilize a horse. Like I can't give you any more. And so I was in such a dark season. And I tell people all the time, like God saved me from unintentional suicide because not that I'd ever tried to necessarily harm myself. I never took more than my dose, but I would go drink. I would go hang out with my friends, get drunk, come home, take my sleeping pills, then wake up like, girl, you really could have did a number on yourself. Like, so I was in that super dark season, and right prior to my grandmother falling ill, in that October, the Lord had told me, have a conference. Have a conference. I've never done ministry prior to that. Like I said, I've always been in church. I've always been raised in the church, but never hosting. Like, I host clubs. Like, what do you mean have a conference?
Host clubs, like clubs?
Yeah, put me on a little flyer, like, join me Sunday Fun Day. So I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Host the conference. So he said the money that you spend to go out and do those things, have a conference. So we had a conference. It was me and two of my other friends. We started a ministry called the SWADs, which is the Save Women of Destiny. And he was like, for your birthday, have the conference. So I have the conference. It was called Stop the Masquerade. And the things that they preached on was about taking off that mask, stop trying to be whoever you are in the world and be who God has called you to be. And I remember it being like that was an unmasking moment for me because I put on this mask, I put on these things to appear of the world and like try to fit in and do these things when I know that I'm called. I know that I'm set apart. So when he did that, that was my initial yes. And then right after that, my grandma got sick and I'm like, now hold up, Lord. I did what you said do. Now this. So I believe that people should understand like warfare will always come with your yes.
Yeah.
And for your initial question, can you ask it to me again?
Yeah, but I love that you went back and said that because I really do think that and even the whole like masquerade thing, taking off the mask, because it really, and you had said something earlier too, like I wasn't just like hellish out here, you know, I was just, doing, I don't want to call them the simple things, but you're just living your life for you. Let's say that.
You're doing the worldly things.
Yeah, you are. And I think, and I loved that you had said earlier that you don't regret it, because I think a lot of times too, taking it to the, you said that a couple minutes ago, but it was really on my mind to emphasize, because I think a lot of times we feel like we have to like completely delete, forget about, bury our old selves and be almost embarrassed of what we went through.
There's no condemnation in Christ.
No condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. It's so good that you so good. Bring us the word, bring it. But I think it's like such a beautiful reminder, because it's not about letting go of your old self and just forgetting it or regretting it or looking back at your old self with shame or guilt. Like that's, because if you're currently in that space, we don't want you to feel like you can't take that next step forward. Like if you take the next step forward, then you'll be living in this place of condemnation, of guilt. That is not of God, first of all.
Absolutely.
But I just love that you made that significant statement, because I think it really is significant. Just not in being in regret, being in your own self, or your old self. But what I was asking more specifically is like, we know that yes, we know that step that you are taking, it comes with some cutting. It comes with cutting loose, letting some things go. What was that experience like for you?
And I will say, to piggyback off of what you just said too, also, now we do have, our old self does have to die.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's no like Control Alt Delete on your memory. It's, you always want to remember where God has brought you from.
That's good.
And that has been a driving point for me, because I don't really have to look back far. Like some people have to think back a long time. Like I'll get fooled thinking about 2 days ago. Like he's so good. He's so kind. He's so faithful. And when you realize that, it helps that cutting process kind of ease the blow. So for me, I cut people, places, things. I didn't care what it looked like. I remember I of course got out that relationship. Thanks be unto God. And he was like, it's time to surrender. So I was like, okay, Lord, whatever you say do, I'll do. So I, end up losing my grandmother. After that, I was like, all right, what's next? So I had to break the lease on my apartment. I had to like take out a loan on my 401k, because I'm like, okay, I got to break it. I don't, apartments charge you $2 million to break a lease. So I had to break a lease. Yeah. I had to find another apartment. And then.
Were y'all living together?
Yes.
Okay, got you.
Living in sin. Y'all don't do it. It's not worth it.
Okay, wait. Why isn't it worth it? Explain that. And not because I believe that it is necessarily, but I think practically, like, what did you experience that made you realize this is harder than maybe it needs to be?
Quite literal hell.
Okay.
So when you're not with the person that God has called you to be, and you choose to connect with that person, and you choose to become one with that person in a sense, you then take on all of their things. You now have a spiritual tie with that person. You now battle with whatever they're battling with. So for me, I knew that anybody in my past was not my husband. I knew that. And it took for me to see and to understand what soul ties looked like, what it looked like to battle things literally and figuratively. When living with someone, like I said, I battled the worst depression of my life. Like when it's not from God, you'll know. And we just choose to ignore the signs. We just choose to please our fleshly desires. We choose to, do what looks like is right on the outside. But for me, when I got to that point, it just was not worth it. And it came to a point where it's who you going to choose? Who are you going to choose? Yeah. And I was like, I'm going with the Lord. Yeah. So
broke the lease.
Found a new place. Like I said, I had took a break from work, ended up going back to work. And I remember praying to God, like, Lord, I don't even want to meet another man that's not my husband. Like, I don't have another relationship in me. I don't have another situationship in me. I'm going to be in jail, Lord. So if you could.
Not jail. Out of all places.
Wrong relationships will take you there.
Hey, I mean, it showed you a side of yourself that maybe I could have kept this and maybe not kept it tucked away. Maybe that needed to come on,
it had
up
to
and
come
out.
Up and out. Deliver me from this spirit, Lord. Yes. So just entered into like a surrendered state. And I remember this guy like writing me on Instagram and was like, oh, like I'm praying for you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who is he? Like, and why are you praying for me? But it was so odd because nobody
Who are you and why are you praying for me?
Nobody really knew what I was going through. Like people close to me knew, but not everyone knew the stripping and the surrender that was taking place in my life. And so for him to reach out when he did, I was just like, you got to test the spirit by the spirit. Lord, is this of you? If not, block it. So I was like, okay. So I wrote him back and he's just like, I really want to take you on a date. Whenever you're ready, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, Lord, I'm not ready to date. I really don't. Again, I don't want anything that's not of you. Mind you, this is within 90 days of me truly surrendering and giving God my yes.
Give us the time frame.
Yeah, within 90 days. And some people say like, how do you move on so fast, this and that? But when you're, as a woman, when you're in a relationship, it's not for you and you're not being treated and valued the way that you're supposed to, you check out far before the end.
Facts.
So,
and why are we, just really quickly, exactly, what are you waiting on? It's actually okay to say that didn't serve me in that instance and move on, again, guilt-free, shame-free. I think sometimes culture in the world tells us that we have to be brokenhearted, that we got to be down and out, screaming and crying on the floor forever.
Cheating is not a trial of a relationship. If you are not valued, leave. If you do not see Christ in him, leave. If this is not of God, this is your sign to leave. It's okay to leave. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to choose God. It's okay to surrender. I promise you, he will give you more than you expect in return. So I just had to tell people that.
Okay, yes.
But back to this man that slid in my DMs. So I write him back like March. It was my niece's birthday. And he was like, you want to go to dinner, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So I left my niece's birthday party early. I got out to eat with this guy and I smelled him before he walked up, girl. I was like,
not your spidey senses.
Girl, I was like, this is a man of God. I feel it. I feel it. So he sat down, we talked, we had a great night. And that first date was with my husband. The first date I ever had.
This better be Mr. Trimble.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
The very first date I had after I surrendered was my husband.
Wow.
And I remember I get emotional when I think about it. I just remember a feeling of safety. I remember a feeling of like, this is God. Because anything that's sent by God, number one, will feel like God. It'll look like God. It will honor you like God. And we went on one date and we never looked back.
Wow.
Ever. And that was in 2020. And then once I got in that relationship, it was just things began to work out. Like it was just like a breath of fresh air. Of course, we hit the pandemic after that. We survived the pandemic. I was like, this is definitely my husband. But I remember writing in a journal. That date was in March. I think it may have been the beginning of April. Because I had tried to write this letter like a year or two prior. And it was titled A Letter to My Husband. but the person I was with, I could not write this letter because that was not my husband, and I knew that. And I remember sitting down writing, and I wrote a letter to my husband, and it was everything that God had laid on my heart to say to him. And a year later, we were engaged, and less than 90 days later, we were married.
That's good. That's good.
Yes.
I love it. Because I'm also wondering, too, do you feel like you were a different woman in that relationship versus coming out of your past? Because I think, number one, we know a few things. We know when you give God your yes, that's the process of sanctification and how that begins. We know that it can be how quick or slow, you know, that, you know, God, the Holy Spirit desires it to be in that case, but things do take time.
Yeah.
So how was that experience for you as a woman, just in general, navigating through, whether it be new identity, letting go of some of your old ways, old habits, even like old ways of thinking, you know what I mean, versus new, did you notice that there was a big shift? Did you kind of wrestle with some of those emotions?
So I started again my healing process probably when I realized I was really depressed that year before. God began to work on my heart and work on the characteristics and traits of what I should look like in that next season. I will say my healing process, I believe God accelerated because once I started dating my husband, I didn't even remember anybody else. I didn't have even a thought of a former relationship. Like I still tell people to this day, my husband is my first boyfriend. Like I don't believe that there was never a relationship.
Nothing
prior
before
to
this
him.
counted.
Who is that man? I'm sorry. I do not know him. But I will say that with things that are sent from God, all things will feel new. So when he came, my husband challenged me to be a better woman. He had to make me realize I'm not like them. And I remember asking him, why are you single? Because he's, how old is he now? 38. So that was 4 years ago. So 34, no kids, great career, very handsome, very mindful,
Very demure.
very strong, very man of God. And I'm like, why are you single? He was like, I'm a king and I know my worth. Floored. You hear me? Like, I was looking at my phone like,
Okay. And not like I'm the prize type of way.
not like I'm the prize, but he's absolutely a prize because a man of God is very much so a prize.
Yeah.
We get so hyper fixated, like, I'm the prize, I'm the queen, I'm the this, I'm the that, not realizing people always say happy wife, happy life. No, it's happy spouse, happy house, because my husband came in and made a huge impact on my walk with Christ. And even though he'll tell people like, I ain't super saved like Boogie, like he calls me Boogie. He is very much so a man of God, but this is just, he carries different mantles. Like he's not no pastor. He's not he ain't finna go preach the gospel, but he ministers in his own way, has a nonprofit. He deals with the youth, he teaches them that you don't have to have, even though you may have a troubled childhood, you don't have to become your circumstances.
That's good.
So he did, he caused me to be a better woman and helped me along the remainder of my healing journey alongside with surrendering to God.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think too, that I knew that your answer was going to be acceleration because I could just see it all over you. Like, and I know that some everyone's experience is different, but it can be a lot if you don't, because that's a really specific area of surrender because they're kind of different areas. Like, like there's your healing, maybe like personal growth, you got career, you got finances, there are different categories in our lives, if you will. And I'm starting to notice that about myself specifically, that God works on each part differently. And when we try to see them as like one thing, that's when, we get overwhelmed. We start trying to control things. We start feeling like, okay, I'm not making enough over here, or I'm not, this isn't where I think it should be over there in this area. And I love that you talked about your relationship specifically, because I think, number one, you weren't looking. Correct. Which is also very lovely, because I think when we go into healing and we want to control that timeline and we want to get back on out there and jump into things, that's when we deal with like counterfeit experiences or, just more turmoil, more than we need to. But I love that you had such a like fluid experience with him, because coming out of such a hard season, it just really could have went there. It could have went left, a lot of self-sabotage from yourself, just many, many things that could happen. But I wanted to ask you in hearing that things were for the most part pretty smooth, pretty kosher. Obviously we know that there are bumps in the road just in general, not saying perfection, but positive, and you knew, and you were confident in it. What else do you think, just like from self, like personal experience outside of your relationship with your now husband, what else do you feel like you, or any other areas where you may have felt some cutting, may have felt like you really did have to drop the old and really step into the new?
I had to lose some friends. When you start, it's a narrow path. It's a very narrow path when you give God your yes. And people, everybody won't understand it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the places and a lot of the things that I used to do, I can't do anymore.
You can't, or you didn't desire?
No, if you're gonna give God a true yes, you can't. Now He did eventually remove those desires, but I know I can't be who God is calling me to be and still be in these environments.
For sure.
I can't continue doing the things that I was doing and expect a different result, because that's like literally the definition of insanity. You do the same thing over and over and over again and expect something different. When you enter into a different season, a different version of you is required.
For sure.
So losing friendships. Ultimately, it was a lot of stripping. Like I said, it was a stretch on my finances. It was a stretch on my career. It was a stretch on like my mental, just realizing like, okay, it's okay to lose some things. Like, and with surrender, you have to surrender other things.
Die to
like
self.
It comes die to self. We got to die to self daily. And so just really realizing what that meant, like what dying to my flesh meant, helped in the surrendering process as well.
Yeah, that's good. And I think too, I say I made the distinction between can't and desire because we going back to the word being our blueprint, being our baseline. Like, we know that there are obviously things that we can't do, and there's a level of elevation that is required of us. But also knowing that sometimes those desires do go away. Like sometimes you don't desire to be out in the club till 4 a.m. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't desire to just do those same things. It could be the smallest of smallest things, but God, I know, and I've experienced it, can literally remove the taste. You know, something that you don't even struggle with anymore.
Right. Yep. But I think a lot of us deal with the things that we deal with because we will not pray and ask God to remove those things. Like, we will, because we're okay with it. So we want to do those things, but when you start praying and asking God to remove it, like you said, He will remove that taste. He will begin to give you different desires.
Yeah. No, I love that. So, okay, we are 2019-ish, coming out of that. I know, obviously, when we were talking about you building a relationship with your husband, that kind of spanned a couple years. When did Girl, You Gotta Pray come into play?
Girl, You Gotta Pray came into play 2021.
2021?
God told me to write a prayer journal for like new, and it's kind of like a base level prayer journal. It's a 21-day journal to allow people to create a habit of praying. And I'm like, okay, I've never written a book. Don't really know what to put in it. So I just began to pray and ask God to give me direction. And it released in 2021, July 30th of 2021. But the prayer journal I thought was like the period. And God was like, no, comma. So wrote the prayer journal. You know, we do something. We check it off our list. Okay, I was obedient. Did it. What's next?
That's so funny, too, because literally, like, you probably put a lot of effort and energy into that, thinking it was done.
Poured my heart out. Poured my heart out.
Who said that?
Sacrificed money. Like, it was just, I was just like, okay, cool. And then he was even like, make it to where, like, I really don't make money off the prayer journals. It's not, but he told me it was not for profit. Like, this is literally something that you need to do. And it's something that my daughters need.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of people say like, I don't know how to pray or I don't know where to start. So it's literally like, it's a word for each day. So like the first day, dedication. I gave a scripture that supported dedication, said a quick prayer on dedication. Lord, help me to be dedicated to you. Remove anybody and anything that will keep me from being dedicated. And then I left 2 pages for journaling. And so it's 21 days of different topics. And so I'm like, okay, Lord, you had me do this. I'm not even going to make any money off of it. Like,
What's up?
check. Did what you said.
Yeah.
And so again, I put a period, and God was like, no comma. And so that next year he was like, gather my people. And I was like, excuse me? Again? Like, what do you mean? So mind you, I'm still having these prayer conferences, or not prayer conferences. I'm having women conferences every year. So 2019.
With SWAD?
SWADs, yeah. 2019, 2020, 2021 was the last one.
Okay.
So I take that back. What year are we in? 2024?
24.
It was 2022
that
I wrote the prayer journal.
Got you.
And Yeah, 2022. Got me messed
You're like,
on my timeline.
I don't know my dates.
Holidays
First of all, the last couple years are not real. It's like post-COVID. It's like, where did the
and
time
they
go?
flew.
Yeah.
They flew.
How
I'm
are
like,
we 4 years later from lockdown? That's crazy to me. But yeah.
mind blowing. But so had 3 years of the SWAT conferences. So I'm still like doing what God says do. I have the conferences. I do the thing. And 2022 is when I wrote the prayer journal. And I was like, okay, cool. And so that year, God told me, you're not doing another SWAT conference. And I was like, excuse me? Like, that's what I just got comfortable at it. Like, I just got really good. Mind you, I've always been behind the scenes. Like, being in front of a camera or being on the being on a microphone, immediately no. Like, I did all the behind scenes. I set up the things. I helped make the flyers. Like, I did the ticket sale. All the administrative stuff, I did. I wouldn't even get up and tell people thank you at these conferences. Like, my other two friends, Treva and LaShawn, would do all the talking. And so I was like, all right. So 2022, wrote the book, thought I was done. God was like, no, there's more. I'm like, okay. So 2022, I actually end up going to this conference. And I don't know if this will transition to something else, but I went to a conference that literally shifted the trajectory of my life.
That's good.
Trajectory. Why did I say that like that?
I liked it. I like the emphasis, trajectory.
Listen.
Because listen, we were never the same after.
Never the same.
Yeah.
So it was number one, it was a place I went to by myself. Again, sometimes things are uncomfortable because I didn't go places by myself. I literally would go to all church events and stuff. I would go with the SWATs. Like, that's just what I would do. Treva, if LaShawn and Treva can't go, Treva's going to go. Sunshine will go with me everywhere. So I asked them, do y'all want to go? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no. So I told my husband, I'm like, I really want to go to this conference. Mind you, this is the day before the conference.
Okay.
I really want to go to this conference. And he's like, okay, who's going with you? Because he's very, very protective.
Yeah.
Like, don't go by yourself. Like, make sure you got your, what in your purse. Like, be safe.
It's Texas.
It's Texas, and he's a Dallas sheriff, so he sees all the things.
Okay.
So he's very protective. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna go by myself, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go by myself because I didn't know. Like, I had never even been. I knew one person on the flyer. I didn't know the lady hosting it, and I was just like, what? Like, Lord, why do you want me to go here? I don't want to go. And so, like, I did want to go, but I don't want to go because it's uncomfortable. I didn't want to go past my comfort zone. So I go. My life changed for the better. I went there and I had experienced the Spirit of God like never before.
Wow.
It was such an eye-opening, I don't even have, like, I literally don't have words to describe the atmosphere at Relaunch. Relaunch was the name of the conference.
Okay. And was it still in Dallas or that's
it was
what
in
I want to ask
Plano.
you? In Plano.
In
okay.
Plano,
So you had a little bit of a drive.
And it was a 3-day thing. And that's what I was saying. I'm like, I'm not going to drive an hour in traffic in Plano. I mean, from Frisco to Plano every day. And so I was just like, well, I'll just go the first day. So I went the first day and it was literally like, God just unlocked so many things in me. Just being in that room, in that environment, in that atmosphere where the presence of God was so tangible, it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
And so that was the very first place that God began to like unlock spiritual gifts in me. It was the first time like I could literally see us sitting under an open heaven. And it's hosted by Monica Minor Ministries. And I didn't know her. I did not. The only person I knew on there was Apostle Mouton. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go support her. Like, because that's my friend's spiritual mom. So I was like, I'll go listen to her. And so that night I went and like I said, it was just, I literally don't have words.
Yeah,
like,
still to this day, you're like, I'm trying to find them, but I ain't got them.
I don't. But I found out the Lord sent me there because Monica Minor ended up being my spiritual mother. And did not realize that till like some months later. So that was August, September, like, because she does it towards Labor Day weekend. So end of August, beginning of September. She reached out to me in like December. Mind you, I do not know her. I had just added her on Facebook the day before. And was like, the Lord told me to reach out to you to be a part of my team. I'm not sure, what aspect. I'm just being obedient by calling you. So when she called, I'm thinking she wanted catering, like, because she loves food, girl. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, you want a catering? And she's like, no, like, the Lord told me to connect with you, to be on my team, blah, blah, blah. And so we did not know what that looked like. I'm like, what team? She's like, I don't know. Because she didn't have a team.
I was like, she didn't even have a role.
No.
Yeah.
And so I was like, sure. She was like, you want to pray about it? I was like, no. Like, I already knew God had sent me there for a reason.
That, yeah.
And I remember sending her a text message after relaunch, like, God sent me here for a reason, and I cannot wait to see what it is.
I love that. Okay, we got to pause really quickly. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Minor Detail Podcast. If you have been enjoying the conversation so far, do not sleep. Make sure you join us for part 2 with Aunna Trimble. We cannot wait to see you soon.